I have a bank and I have rules of whom to give what kind of finance, how much to give finance, what should be my rules of the security, etc., etc. If you go to the banking sites today, you can get an online approval or a pre-approval of a loan. Yeah, you can get an online pre-approval of finance. What does the software do now? It implements all those business rules, isn't it? So it is implementing all those business rules, and that is where you have the business process layer. So if you have a defect in the business process layer, can you blame the application layer? You can't. So we have to get the first things first. So you have to have the business process layer right in order to really get into the business application, questioning the business application layer. So that's where the foundation comes in the internal controls. Now, the problem with the business application layer is, what does it do? It simply automates your business logic. But we start really going one step down. It is trusting a whole platform of technology, right? So when it's your ERP running or your core banking system running, or if it is your simple Excel running, it is actually trusting quite a lot of the systems below. If the systems below were to cause any unauthorized act in terms of the information being manipulated or accessed, we have a problem. Yes. So therefore, once the organization starts using technology, they have a problem with a new dimension of risk. And this new dimension of risk is where the need for control comes in. So you're looking at, oh my goodness, I have something called hacking. 20 years back, if your organization was never really interested in computers, will you be interested in hacking? Well, it doesn't even matter to me, isn't it? So once we really start looking at the technology and the downsides of it, that is where you get interested in the technology layer, not because of the technology layer, but in terms of the attributes of information. That's the reason COBIT expands. Can you expand COBIT acronym? Control? Control objectives? For? Yeah, that's the word. It is not control objectives for information technology. It is control objectives for information and related technology. Is there a difference? So it's not a technical standard which is focusing on the technology behind information, but it is a governance standard focusing on the information that drives entities, because of which you are actually dependent upon technology. Therefore, from that lens, I am looking at technology. For example, if I am doing an audit, I would not be really interested in getting into the, let us say, okay, firewall audit I am doing. Will I be interested in getting to know, okay, how many capacitors went into that, what kind of the motherboard architecture is there, or what kind of that is there? That's not my concern. But I'm certainly interested. The moment you have a device and my information passes through that, I'd like to know minimum two things. A, does it add any value to this information? B, does it have a risk which creates to my information? And that's exactly where, if you see right at the rock bottom layer, we are looking at the value and the trust perspectives. Right. So, that being the premise, you have those attributes. You remember we discussed about the attributes of information? The most common attribute that we always refer to is the CIA. Right? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. Is there a difference between confidentiality, secrecy, and privacy? Yes? There is, isn't it? Your password is supposed to be secret, isn't it? But when you really take the role of a manager in a bank, the information that he handles is not secret, but it is supposed to be kept confidential with the role. Right? But another person coming in the same position into that bank has to have access to that particular data. So similarly, when you start looking at privacy, it is more to do with information which actually the organization may not be interested in protecting. Oh, it is your information which is lying with me. It doesn't really help me in my business transaction. Oh, your date of birth or whatever, unless and until to the extent of what is required regulatorily. For my business transaction purposes, I am not very keenly interested in all that. And that's exactly where it brings in the perspective of need to protect the external stakeholders' interest, wherein the customer is here, sitting here and saying, I am giving you my personal information, which is private to me, personally identifiable to me. Are you making sure that along with all what are you protecting my information? So if you really start looking at dissecting these attributes, do you see control perspectives? So that's exactly where they brought in this information criteria, and in 4.1 you had a 7 criteria of the informations attributes. What were they? Of course, the CIA. What did CIA do? I am looking at trust in terms of security, and when I say security, it is measured by the 3 popular attributes of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So are you delivering that? I raise 1 hour lab. Oh, I am buying a machine. I am buying one of the best servers, right? Now the big question is, it does all that fine, but then is there a cost value proposition that has been measured? I can't be spending blindly on technology. I need to see the business value behind it. That's where they brought in the 2 attributes of effectiveness and efficiency. So it measures in terms of the quality of how IT supports an enterprise. And the last but not the least were the fiduciary factors. Well, the online loan mechanism which I just mentioned, wherein a customer can go online, put in his whatever details, his income details, and he can get a pre-approved loan. When he does that, let us say he has been wrongly approved 3 times the sum which is entitled, because there was a small issue with the rule set that went into the technology. There is a business impact. So we are looking at compliance both with external regulations and internal regulations, which comes in as a fiduciary requirement, and the reliability of a system. How much can I trust the system in terms of its consistent performance and its consistent usage of what it delivers? So that is where all that led to the information criteria being the connecting common language. Because here the top management clearly say, I understand what I need from an attribute perspective, right? The technology also is able to understand, okay, this is what you need, now let me see how I can build it into my technology architecture. So it brought in that very important piece of common language. Otherwise, if you look at the problem traditionally that was happening was, I have a technical management who are very good at technology, but they may not have a very deep insight into some of the business functions. So that may lead to different perspectives of understanding expectations. So that's where it brought in this, which actually bursted that bias or the, you know, the kind of lack of clarity around that. So coming back, when I look at assurance engagements, I'm just giving some examples depending upon whichever countries you come from, whichever states you come from. You can look at, I clearly told you, this is the rule to apply. You got something just coming from mandated by the regulator. It could be either in terms of a financial reporting, or it could be in terms of a control. It could be simply testing a control, or it could be simply something which your stakeholders need to know, right? Or it could be something which is specific in terms of what you want to convey just beyond what the law says. So you take that and you have, you remember the SOX 404, yeah, and the 302 arrangements, right? If you really look at the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, what did it try to do? What did it try to do? Why did it come at all at the first place, Sarbanes-Oxley? Trust deficit, isn't it? There was a trust deficit. And the trust deficit came, which was supposed to be actually driven based on enterprise governance. You didn't mandate it till then. Well, an organization is supposed to do that, is what was the implied kind of understanding. But when they found that it has impacted lives of people in so many different ways, they went out to brought a regulation. So an organization which is driven by enterprise governance never waits for regulation. They simply put themselves into the seat of every stakeholder, understand what is their expectation, and accordingly deliver to those requirements. So that's the reason you will find in some of the banks that you deal with, you get more frequent information on how your account is performing, what kind of offers or whatever. Yeah, they also keep on telling you about, okay, why don't you have this scheme instead of that scheme, right? So they just extend themselves beyond just, okay, what's mandated by law, to tell you, okay, so much tax has been deducted or whatever. So those kind of information. So the SOX started with putting in that framework which said, okay, if you are delivering to investors, stakeholders, you better look at their ultimate expectations and understanding that. And of course, you have various requirements like the financial reporting audit. Then you have the tax audits. You could have the audits which are mandated by your revenue department in your state, right? Which could be like your income tax audits, your indirect tax audits, etc., etc., right? And then you have specific regulatory audits coming from verticals, like the banking regulator. The banking regulator could specify certain types of audits, right? And there could be a securities exchange regulator who again prescribes audits for the securities exchange sector. So healthcare, you can go on like this in every country. These are there in this. And then now this is started emerging in the last few years with kind of rapid pace. Incidentally, it has been mandated by law. But earlier, if you see in most countries, ISO is not a mandated law, isn't it? It is a standard. And why do you really want to endorse that standard? Why do you want to really certify against the standard? What are your stakeholder perspectives? Yeah?
Self-assurance.
Yeah, one is self-assurance. You are actually trying to drive the confidence in a relationship. Yes, so that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to tell somebody that the way that I handle your information is safe. Right? So you're looking at the various audits which take place under this. And we'll not go into that, but I just want to insist on this. Everywhere that you take, it will talk about the need for adequate internal control system which is commensurate with the size of the company and the nature of its business. Each of these words has a very deep meaning. Why? Because when you say an internal control system needs to exist, which means you are looking at something that has been defined, documented and put in place. How has it been put in place? By considering, one, the size of the entity, and more importantly, the nature of its business. As we just saw some time back, if you have a retail industry, the way that they would look at information attributes would be significantly different from a banking industry as compared to a securities trading industry. You appreciate the point? If you take a simple parameter like response time and you take each of these three industries, they are completely diverse and they have a significant business impact. You put in, let us say you are on an online trading system, right? Let's compare first. Let's say you walk into a departmental store and your POS system does not work, right? You have a tolerance of some time, but it's only an irritation factor. But do you suffer a financial loss there? Not really, isn't it? So the delay doesn't really cause a loss. But when you really go to an online trading system, you are ordering by this script so much. And there is a latency because of the browser. It takes a little more time, 20 seconds more to come back and respond to you. You could be in a completely different situation. You may not want the transaction at all. So that's exactly where it deals with breaking it down into these various aspects. And of course, following by the internal audit and looking at a fraud. So I'm not going into the details.
So, just a question.
Yes, sir.
Something called team-based audit.
A team-based audit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Team. So I'm not very sure whether COBIT covers it.
Team-based audits?
Yeah.
Yes.
And where does it fit in?
Okay. I will give you that. Especially COBIT5 will do that for you. It's a very interesting question. Please keep the question alive just in case. I'll come back to that. Okay. So let's move on. Now, one perspective, what we saw here, the SEBI clause 49 is nothing but your SOX of India. The Sarbanes-Oxley of India is SEBI clause 49. More or less, you will find that the requirements are similar. Right? Now, what is the idea? Here we are looking at the set of stakeholders who are the investors and to the external agencies whom you are doing a financial reporting, and thereby you're looking at controls which are relevant to financial reporting, theme-based controls which are relevant to financial reporting. When I start looking at that, how much does IT really concern me is the big question. So that's exactly where, for example, business continuity planning, disaster recovery. Will it matter to me for a statutory auditor, for an external auditor doing financial statement audit? It will not. You agree with that? Yeah, but let's look at it. You are the stakeholder in a bank, right? Yeah, the question is, you are, with regard to business continuity planning and disaster recovery, is it an area of concern for the person, the external auditor, who is certifying your financial reporting? Okay, forget about Basel II. Let us go into the brass tacks of it. What is the business impact? Is there a business impact in terms of financial reporting? It is. Can you say how? Okay, but does it affect my financial reporting? See, financial reporting is all about integrity of figures, right? Only that or something more? Okay. Okay, it doesn't affect me because I got all the figures in place. I'm very happy with the integrity of the information systems. So I have no concern. This is something to do with availability. Why should I be bothered? Okay, timely reporting requirement. Fine, let us say that is not the case here because you have a timely reporting which is happening. You have certified your accounts. Let's look at why. Any financial statement, the basis of preparing a financial statement is it is a going concern. Yeah, it's a going concern. If let us say all your databases were to go conked tomorrow morning and there is absolutely no support, which means no backup, you can't bring those things back. Can the organization survive tomorrow morning? You can't. So you are looking at a very serious issue in terms of something like a business continuity planning and disaster recovery, which makes quite a lot of impact on the financial reporting. So that is where it talks about each of these controls in a pretty detailed manner. Sorry. And then let us come to regulations like privacy regulations. Here it talks about how do you protect personal identifiable information of individuals. How does your systems ensure that adequate, here the law says that reasonable security measures shall be put in by the body corporate. In fact, the section is so specific, if you do not do that, and if somebody gets harmed, the damages are unlimited under the Act. Not only that, it provides for up to 7 years of imprisonment. You know of whom? Can you guess whom? CEO? Anything else? CIO? CFO? You know what is the wording in the Act? Every person in charge of the conduct of business. This is crazy, isn't it? So you can imagine the big Pandora's box it really opens up. So that is where it really brings in for a very tight audit system and an assurance around it. So that is where this conveys in terms, whatever audits you're taking, you can put it somewhere in this framework. So once we start doing, let us look at what is the problems that we face with IT audits. It could be IT audits, as I said, for the purposes of supporting another audit, which could be an operational audit or a financial reporting audit, or it could be simply an IT assurance, isn't it? So when we take this, let us look at what are the key issues. The first and foremost, let's look at how do we scope IT audits today. How does it happen generally? Scoping of IT audits? Okay, there's an audit charter which says, okay, this is what you shall do and this is what you shall cover, and you have an audit plan, right, which covers the various aspects. Good. Any other perspectives?
Yeah, it's risk focused, particularly depending on the category of risk you.
Okay, that's a good dimension. How do you determine the risk? Who all players come into play when you're deciding on the risk?
Risk assessment department, risk management.
Okay, so you're actually trying to get all those guys who matter for that technology in place. For example, if you're auditing a financial reporting system, a financial accounting system, you get all the players, the business process as well as the support departments to come and brainstorm and tell you, okay, this is the risk and this is what you guys need to ensure is not, right? Okay. Do you think that's a foolproof method? Sorry? Yes? Oh. Exactly. That's exactly the point. Whatever you said, that's great. But are we linking up? See, every organization declares its vision, mission, business goals, strategies, governance objectives. How does it all link up, or as they say, cascade right up to the information system controls? Is there a mechanism to ensure that? Do we understand the business risk underlying each of these technology risks? It could be as simple thing as sharing a pen drive. But pen drive where and for what matters. I'll tell you one typical case with one of our audits. It was a manufacturing organization, and when we really get into engage with them for the first time, they said, see, we are into manufacturing and this information technology is not really something that we care about too much. But anyway, you guys can go out, and if you can tell us something which is really interesting for us, we'll look at it. On the very third day, when we're doing from our desktop simply a scan, we got hold of some very, very sensitive diagrams. How did you know these were sensitive? These were the diagrams which are shared by the collaborating partner from another country under a contract, wherein if you violate the sharing, which is you share it beyond what is supposed to be shared, it's an IPR, right? And there were serious consequences. And we were just able to log in as any person in the network and able to access that. And they got the fright of their lives. They're, oh my goodness, this is something, if the collaborator even comes to know about it, we had it seriously. And till now, there is no clue how many people have taken this and sold it outside. So those were the kind of risks that came about. So we need to really look at how do you go about scoping the audit. Do we understand the stakeholder needs well? We are not stopping with goals. We are putting ourselves in identifying and analyzing what is the interest of each of those stakeholders. So once we start putting there, we know, okay, this is a wish list of good to have things and got to have things. And then you can decide what to include in your scope in discussion with the management. So, but the whole problem is, believe me, most managements, if you ask them, okay, what's the scope of audit? They may be very narrow in terms of suggesting what they need in their, minimum scope. The auditor has to really help them to scope it better. And how do you help them if you don't have a knowledge about what they're supposed to do? And this is where COBIT really helps. So we'll look at that. And then let's look at it. How much do IT audits address the management spelled out and not spelled out business concerns need? That's what I was saying. One is, I have a requirement, I have a law which says you must get an audit done and give us a report in this format. Great. If the format is not specified, then what do you do? Who decides? Well, the IT auditor and the management sit together and say, okay, let's discuss A, B, C, D, E. You report to me on that. That's good. If you start comparing the various constituents in that industry, the reports, will they be comparable? They obviously will not be. So you are now entering to another area wherein you say, okay, now it's regulated fine, but then still we are having a difference with understanding what's the regulation like, what does it want to achieve, what granularity, what does it want to achieve. So it is not only the spelt out needs of the management, the auditor also needs to look at the not spelt out needs of the management. Then, do we have a clearer understanding of the technology components that deliver to that specific business requirement? Let me take the same example, access management. Now the simple issue could be that people who are not supposed to authorize certain level of transactions have now authorized transactions. So what is our role in that? Let us say there are some certain purchases which some of the people who are not supposed to authorize those purchases have actually gone to authorize those purchases. What's our role in that? They have been using the ERP system, let's say. What's our role? Okay. When you say all access rights, what does it mean? Right. What we try to do is, we are again having a reactive approach. It's common with all of us. When we start with that, we start with the reactive approaches. Oh, there is a burning problem here, let's take it. But the root of the problem lies somewhere else. How at all did this guy get the access to this in terms of the very basic architecture? If the architecture is flawed, this could be happening somewhere else where the management doesn't know. So we start not just looking at reactive approaches, start going down into the technology layer, because there could be simple technology integration issues which could lead to this. In fact, we have seen wherein transactions were pushed in from backend because the application was not able to support that. There are such cases, data patches. When you do that, the front end looks fine. But actually, if you really see how it happened, it was through the back-end data patches. So we need to really get into understanding a little more about the technology components and what do they achieve for them and the related business-specific requirements. So do we have an organized understanding of the underlying controls, the failure? Yes, sir?
Particular example, not necessarily a deviation or departure. In fact, I will give them the purpose we use them.
Yeah, quite possible. Exactly. That's where the need for the framework comes in. The whole question that starts into debate next is, as I was saying, somebody has been permitted access beyond what he's permitted. it has been specifically authorized. Now, do you question it or not? Does the auditor have to write to question it?
Yeah.
Very much. What will be your, you're right. What will be the criteria for questioning?
Why was the departure? What compelled you to go further?
Where you are actually looking at is, you're looking at the domain, the functional domain, and you clearly see there is a mismatch in the kind of access that has been given from the normal, and that's where you start questioning even the design. Well, it could be very well part of the framework, but you're questioning the very framework. So that is where, the policy, part of the policy, you question the policy. So that is where we need to look at that, sorry. And then look at, okay, do we have the, you may have the report from one of the experts in network vulnerability assessment, and it could tell you, okay, the FTP on a particular IP is insecure. And it says IP so and so, and it tells you this is a file server, right? But beyond that, does it convey the business risk? That's the problem it starts. So if you give this report to the top management, I mean, what do you see? It's encrypted, isn't it? If something is written there, which what will you do? Okay, this is not my subject, let the IT department handle it. And once it goes back to the IT department, oh, we know about all this, so what's this auditor really? I told him at that time, right? So what's his problem? So it is going back to the court, wherein he is going to say, sorry, if the same report said, these strategy documents, which are lying on this particular folder, which relate to your strategy of 2013 to 2020, and they are accessed by me in this folder, here's a screenshot. You know what it means to them, right? You need not talk about FTP, you need not talk about all that. You say, I have this document with me. Now you ask me the question, how did it get there? I want him to ask that question. Then I tell him, your FTP is flawed. Okay, what do we need to do about it? Call this guy and say, you better plug whatever he says. Right? So, when you give recommendations, the whole problem you will see with follow-up audits is, recommendations are implemented, not implemented. You see the difference? I can satisfy a recommendation being implemented in a style that I have done whatever the auditor said, but it never achieves the purpose. Right? So I have done whatever he said. I have put in a policy. Yes, I have a policy in place. I have put in this control. Yes, it is done in place. But did it achieve the purpose? No, it was not done. So that's where we need to really look at this as a very important area. And do we have an audit framework which is aligned with the IT governance framework? That's a very important area that we need to look at. Why? Because unless you and the management are thinking on the same lines of philosophy, neither you nor the management will ever agree that what is being said is absolutely relevant. So, how can we do this? Let's look at it. First of all, let me just quickly map this. You have got extensive mappings of 4.1 to 5, COBIT5. And as I said, COBIT 4.1 has been extensively used by many auditors all over the world. It is one of the widely used. And for auditors, I would strongly recommend, out of my experience, the IT Assurance Guide. It holds very much good. You can take it and use it. It is a simply take it and use it book. You can simply take it and use it. You just need to customize in terms of saying what applies to you, what does not apply. That's it. But it gives you a whole repository of the audit steps in terms of design, in terms of testing operating effectiveness, in terms of what value it will deliver, in terms of what risk drivers it will address. So that's the level of detail it goes into. Okay. Then, the other thing, of course, is if you